Ke tuku koe ko rongo, ke aro koe ka marama, ke tuhono koe ka oho. In stillness we sense, in presence we hear, in connection we become conscious. I would like to acknowledge the Waitemata where we are. Ngāti whātua Aurake is mana whenua of this land, those who have come before us and those who have come after us. A very warm welcome to you all today. Thank you so much for coming to the talk about Paererewā, the 1,000-year bench project. My name is Sam Johnson and I have the great privilege of moderating today and being a general manager and one of the founding trustees along with Hideaki and Derek Handley, wherever he is, of Paererewā. And a big welcome. Ko araki te manga, ko rakaia te awa, ko makitamini te hapu, ko husband Tyler Raku, ko Pepe Elsie, a ko whānau who likes 5 a.m, and ko Sam Johnson toko ingoa. Okay. This kaupapa began with the idea of 1,000 benches for 1,000 years. And today, with this esteemed panel, we're going to be discussing that. We all know a bench, a place to sit, a place to rest, a place to remember. They're everywhere, and too often they're in the wrong place. Our panelists, Hideaki Fukutake. Hideaki is the CEO of Still, best known owning of the world of wearable arts, Metro Magazine, and many more, about 20 companies in New Zealand. He's also the chair of Paererewā and one of the founding trustees, and part of the family behind the Benesse art site in Aotearoa in Japan. Deeply committed to cultural projects that connect people across place and time, he supports ideas and invites us to reimagine how we live. Hideaki, thank you for making time.
Thank you.
Kim Paton. Kim is the director of Objectspace and serves on the Curatorial board for Paererewā. She's a leading voice in design, craft and architecture in Aotearoa, and last year published a book on seating as a part of Objectspace landmark exhibition on seats. So is the seat guru. and a very special guest from the United Kingdom, Madhav Kidao, UK architect and designer whose work explores memory, material, and the future of public spaces. He's one of my favorite architects from following his work. He's exhibited at the Coachella and at the Venice Biennale as part of the British government, with the latter, and is the designer of a proposed pie for Queenstown, which is supported by the British Council. Madhav has brought generosity, rigour, and a fresh perspective to his design of Paererewā, which you'll see up here. It's actually this one here that you can see, which is proposed to go in Queenstown and has flown particularly from the UK for today's panel, and then it's going down for a community meeting in Queenstown tomorrow. Yeah. So, without further ado, Hideaki, you helped found Paererewā with Derek and I. Why this project? Why now?
Hello, everyone. Why this project? Okay, so I have been working on a civil art project on the very small island called Naoshima for about 20, 30 years. And actually, I visit more than 100 exhibition or galleries a year. And from that experience, one thing I really feel that is that the world is speeding up a lot. And I just had a study recently, and the one thing is that the interesting thing is that how the tech to grow fast is, so I think the computer took 14 years to get 50 million users, and the mobile phone is 12 years, and internet is 7 years. So then iPad or Pad thing is 2 years, and surprisingly, the generative AI was just 2 months. So it's kind of very crazy thing. So of course it's getting more and more convenient, and I also like the tech, but I just wonder, so are we losing something along with that? And to be clear, I'm very tech. I love tech, so I get the iPhone almost every year, and I use the generative AI, the 3 type of things at the same time, but just feel a little bit strange. And at the same time, I start to think about the power of art. And there are so many things, the interesting thing, but the fantastic things what the art can do is that which make people, to stop or slow down. So when you guys see the wonderful art and which really speaks to you, so you stop or you stare at the artworks and carefully look at that kind of artworks. So it's very interesting to me. So at that time, so I was just started thinking about what kind of art can the make people stop, and it hit me. So benches, it's very easy. So when you guys sit on the bench, you literally stop, and it's more reasonable than art, and easier to install. And yeah. And if you ask to someone to put the artwork somewhere, so people say no, it's complicated, so the art is difficult. But if you ask, can I put bench somewhere? So the people say sure. So that's a starting point.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
It's a great theme of a bench as a place to disconnect from technology. And I think it's something Derek's spoken a lot about with other founding trustee in that journey. So thank you. Kim, you curated the first our initial long list of panel of New Zealand-based makers and designers for Paererewā, and some of them are rotating through the screen behind you. Can you just tell us about how you did that, and the opportunity you see for Paererewā supporting the designers that we have involved in our supply panel?
Kia ora. Thank you for having me. I think one really interesting aspect of the project, and Hideaki's referred to, the difference between designing or making something that has a kind of utility to it, that is not driven by spectacle, which is kind of what we think about public works of art, is kind of what that opens up in terms of the scope of the makers and designers or practitioners that could be part of that commissioning process. And I guess that was thrilling for us to be able to be part of, shaping this very beginning. I mean, there's 1,000 of them to come. There's plenty of time to grow that list, but, to imagine, this incredible breadth of artists, craftspeople, architects, designers that might, really be kind of tantalized by this challenge. And I think, again, in Aotearoa, it doesn't feel like we're still kind of working on this idea of this vernacular, this everyday kind of design culture. I think we often feel like design is something that happens over there, that we're not actually engaging with it in every aspect of our lives as we move through public spaces, as we sit, as we walk down the street. And so I think, again, that idea of a project of this scale that seeks to really highlight and amplify the work of designers and architects and craftspeople alongside artists is deeply thrilling. And so, and I think, the brief was really that while I'm sure there will be moments of spectacle inside this project, that it is driven by this idea of creating these moments where you can sit and pause and think about where you are and all of those things. And people who make with their hands, and designers and architects who are thinking about how our bodies interact and move through space are perfectly suited for the pitch.
Thank you, Kim. And thank you for all you've taught me and the Still team over the time about makers and designers.
Thank you.
And people who make furniture, this beautiful, almost undernourished field of arts in New Zealand, and so important.
Yeah, well, again, when we were working on the chair show for Objectspace, and it was looking at a 170-year span, and it was just this endless discovery of stories that are almost lost, of designers, makers, practitioners, some who did enormous things, who made huge contributions to kind of fostering, design-based practice here in Aotearoa, and it is just so difficult. We just have not created an ecosystem to sustain that kind of practice here, and it was just this wild thing of endless discovery, and very little on the permanent record from these practitioners.
Cool, thank you. I'll come to you now, Madhav. I mean, you were our first international designer involved in this project, and courtesy of the British Council for New Zealand and the Pacific. And I mean, you've presented at amazing places around the world. How did you approach the project, and what did you think of the brief?
Well, when you approached us with the brief, it was such a fascinating idea that I think it immediately resonated with a lot of things that we'd been thinking about already at the time. It was actually quite coincidental, I think. We'd been thinking about time and longevity and impermanence a lot in our work. And a lot of our projects have been quite temporary. And so the idea of thinking about something at 1,000-year scale is just so fascinating and such a beautiful idea. But also even just the thing about connecting to landscape and place is so universal. A lot of the way we think about work is kind of about channeling the human experience and sort of finding ways of using design to really connect to how we are as people and the things that are really visceral to us. Yeah. And the idea of relating to landscape is something that everyone understands, everyone has a feeling to. So even though this is the other side of the world, it's still something that we can immediately imagine and envision and understand how we could use. And I mean, also it's a beautiful opportunity to come to somewhere like this, which is, even just a stunning place on earth, frankly. But it's, so we were so excited about that opportunity. And also just for us, I think those sort of projects where it's so undefined as to what it is, or what it's meant to be, or what the opportunities are like the ones that are most fascinating, where there's no preconceived idea of what something should be, and you can just think about anything open. And it kind of gave us a good chance to start really imagining even just the ideas and the kind of beyond design. What does 1,000 years mean? What does 1,000 years in the past mean to here? What does 1,000 years in the future mean? Who are we designing for? Is it even for people? Is it even for animals? Is it for an ecology? There's something completely different. What actions you can do? There's so many opportunities to think about that, and that was kind of for us a really nice design exercise, which is kind of what really drew us in.
Could you explain your design a little bit? We've got a picture of it.
Yeah, so we went through a few iterations thinking about what we could design. And one of the things you do a lot, and the piece I did in Venice, for example, is about the death of work and about destruction and decay and just designing for decay. So we'd kind of had been thinking about some ideas where we were designing for something to be destroyed and to decay over 1,000 years. But then I think there were so many interesting quotes in your brief to us, and the whole idea of the pie being about exchange was a really interesting thing, and this moment of exchange between cultures and multi-generational idea, and then also the idea of being present was a really interesting thing. And so we ended up deciding, actually, let's make something that feels monumental and is present, but isn't about a particular time. So the idea of working with stone was something we think about, and that just felt like something that existed on a different scale of time when you work with stone. And and the stone is obviously of the place, and it's of where we are making the work, but it's not of a time, right? It exists. It's not of this particular civilization. It's not this particular culture. It was a previous culture or a future culture. And we love the idea that it could feel like this thing had been here for 1,000 years already, or in the future it might have been there from the future. There is not of a particular age. So that was ended up being our starting point, was actually just to try and make something that didn't feel like it used technology of now. It could have been the technology of the past. It was about the kind of materials that existed of the site. And then the other idea was, I think we like design that forces a behavior. It kind of forces people to act in a particular way. I think design is most interesting when it kind of challenges your approach to anything. It kind of challenges who you are and your sort of day-to-day activity. So we were really drawn to the tete-a-tete chairs, the kind of love seats, those chairs which are two seats facing, you're sort of facing each other, kind of like the sort of old Victorian style chairs. Always something I found really interesting. But we sort of abstract that into a sort of ancient carving. And partly the idea was that it was I think we were talking about this being on a trail, potentially, or somewhere in the landscape, that it's this moment that disrupts the trail and forces two people who might have been walking in opposite directions to come and stop and speak to each other. Or it might be a point where you decided to meet at this point to have a discussion or pass on a story. And it becomes this kind of, the idea of an intergenerational story that handed down from time to time. And then the third component of it was about elevating it above the landscape, just so that you have a different perspective. It's just a little thing that is just sort of processional and that forces you to kind of step up, is a bit of a ritual. And it's something that really forces you to be present, because of an act that you're having to do. And so it's little things that are changing your behavior to kind of force you to think about being in the moment and appreciate where you are and sort of kind of interchange with somebody else.
It's an amazing design. Congratulations. And if anyone wants to learn about how to make it, Ryan and I are learning a lot about making a 10-ton sculpture out of probably 10 different rocks in Queenstown. Hideaki, I mean, your family's work in Japan at the Nisei Outside is a masterclass in works and land, place-based works changing over time. I guess, what have you learned over that process that you think we could apply to, and that you are applying to Paererewā?
So almost all artworks or project we have done in our small island is the permanent artworks. So if you want to install the artworks there, what we need to do is carefully understand, the place. So what kind of history or context or culture are there? And if you want to do something in the community, and if people live there, you need to understand how people live there and what's the value of them. So that sort of thing is the fundamental things we need to do before we start the project. So for example, one of the architects called Sambuichi, so he's the architect. So we asked him to build the staff house. So it's quite urgent thing, but he said he wanted to study for a year because he tried to utilize, the natural resource as much as possible. And Japan has the 4 seasons, so he just want to research for, the April. So how, the height, the sunlight come from, the wind flow, which direction the wind come from, that sort of things. So we just need to wait for 1 year for the research, and after that we, start to discuss what kind of the project we are doing. But that sort of process is very important, because even bench, if we install a bench, it's going to be almost the permanent things. So if we create the disaster one, so it's last for a long time. So it's kind of tragedy. So I think the old parties should come into the same tables, so not only just architect, but designer or the owner, or everybody's need to share that sort of idea, and also show the respect for that sort of environment as well. So otherwise, it's very difficult to make the very artworks which can last for a long time.
Yeah, I think that's one of the great things that you've taught me and brought to this project is there's the place-based nature of it, and that we do the research on the site, we understand the multiple layers of histories. We talk a lot with tangata whenua to understand those histories, and then produce a brief that then an artist or designer, furniture maker, industrial designer, architect can respond to. And the project really, though, is a complete reverse of Naoshima Island, because it's a lot of artworks on one small island. Well, a group of islands. There's 7 different islands or more now that have works on them. So instead of one sort of place with lots of works, we've got now lots of works across what is quite a large country, ideally. And we might only do 10 Paererewā a year, but also that would be a great success. I guess, why that approach? Like, why not do them all on one place here? And what's your idea about the network?
So actually, we use several islands now, but there are so many islands there. 2,000 islands.
2,000, sorry.
So many. So we, haven't think about how to expand that sort of project, but we just focus on the specific place. So it's not that big different from the Paererewā. So we don't have any intention how to cover all New Zealand with the benches, but we need to focus on the specific place and need to understand what sort of story the place have. And I think gradually that sort of the dot is increasing, and as a result it might dot might connect, but we don't need to care about how to connect that sort of the dot, but rather just focusing on a specific place. And nowadays we just started from a very small island now, but it's called Naoshima. But we just started Aotearoa last month, and during the time we used 15 islands. So it's in a sense it's the growing and expanding, but it's naturally that sort of things happen. So I think we don't need to care about the total scale from the beginning.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's one of the points Kim made at one of our curatorial board meetings, that this thing's not going to be perfect at the start. It's going to evolve and develop over time. Kim, what's your hope for the designers who are involved in this, and I guess the economy that we hope to create around furniture makers?
I guess it's, it's that thrilling proposition of this really ambitious and long-ranging project that also is about commissioning craftspeople and designers to make this type of work. We could talk endlessly about this, the kind of cultural sector we have here and the limits of its scale, and also I think this very very young built environment in terms of again I think this maybe this lack of awareness about something being able to endure, and I think that's why the 1,000 years is so gobsmacking to so many people, that for us in New Zealand, to be in a building that's 150 years old is quite remarkable, We quite like knocking them down here. But so, the hope is that, that it can really continue, it's this tiny kernel of this thing at the moment, and this amazing thing watching you wrangle the efforts required to actually place these works. But how extraordinary for it to think about in 10 years or 100 years. It's an amazing thing to think about a project that you won't be there to see. But the idea for the practitioners that are involved in them, that it can be this kind of catalyzing and significant kind of engagement that brokers this work. I think as well, there's this incredible democracy to the project, that it is for anyone and everyone, in a huge diversity of potential sites and spaces. And so the opportunity for that to engage in so many different ways and not sit within this rarefied bubble of what a lot of arts and culture production sits in is thrilling.
I think that's a great point on the democratization, that anyone can suggest a site. You don't have to own that site. You don't even have to be the story holder. You could just visit it and think it's special, or you could do one as a landowner and be the donor yourself. It's been funny just over the couple of days in the art fair, sitting downstairs where we're trying to explain that to people and go, you don't have to have funds to be able to do it. We might fundraise for it, but if it's a great site, we'll do that over a long period of time. And it's sort of the competition of ideas. Madhav, what would be your advice to a designer who is trying to approach this in a different... You've worked with a lot of very interesting materials and a lot of sort of interesting briefs and making things. But what would be your advice or approach to someone designing one of these or thinking about a site?
I think it's to your point actually just about how things here don't last long. I think that's, to be fair, kind of a global problem. I think, especially a designer, the opportunity to make something that lasts for so long doesn't really happen anymore. And as an architect, working in the UK, same likewise, people design things that last 50 years, 100 years, right? And it's just a wasteful way of making or designing or anything, right? It's kind of an unsustainable practice. So even just as a way for designers to think about their own practice, maybe in other contexts, it's a really nice way of just sort of situating yourself in a longer time frame and what the connotations of that mean and the sort of the pace of the work. And also just the thing that's very nice is when you think about that sort of time, you really separate yourself from the process. It's so much more than you as a designer, right? And it sort of connects you to a much bigger story, to the world, to everybody around you. So even just as a process, it's a very nice thing. So I kind of say as a designer, it's like just enjoy the process of thinking about what it could become. You know, in a way, very simple and very straightforward, but the thinking behind it is a really nice kind of design exercise.
That's a great way. Hideaki, I mean, we designed this part of Paererewa where 25% of the total budget goes into an endowment fund that supports the Pae into the future, supports a community group to look after the Pae forever. And that's our maintenance model that we sort of talk to councils about, and sort of that's our big trick to letting them give us their land to put an interesting bench on. What's your approach of managing over multiple generations of time? You're a 15th generation Fukutake and 4th generation running the Benese Corporation.
Okay, so before that, I think that point is very interesting. So if we like to create the new value, I think at the very beginnings we should spend lots of time to to create the very core value. But some points, I think the concept of letting go, that sort of thing is very important. So we cannot control everything, so we shouldn't do that. So, and Naoshima's project as well. So we try to create the core value for the first 10 or 15 years, but now we gradually start to open to work with the third party or outside people. So otherwise, so so we should leave the room for say some the interesting things. So yeah, I think that kind of thing is very important. So now our stage is how to start to collaborate with the other people we feel uncomfortable. So the concept of a Paererewā as well. So we spend a lot of time to create a concept now. But I think if we really want to, to keep these kind of things, we should be flexible for the future concept, I think.
I think it's a great suggestion, and that's what you always coach us on. Just like don't control it too much. Just let it evolve, let it grow. Let's see what happens.
That's the kind of balance.
Yeah. How did the idea come about with you and Derek? Derek, you can pipe in here if you like.
Do you remember?
We both just had a very similar thought process that he's described at the beginning, coming at it from slightly different angles. I think Hideaki was probably more on the multi-generational thought and less on the reflective or the place for an individual, maybe 70-30, and I'm on the idea more of like create more space where people can reflect on what it means to be a human being in the future, alone, themselves, someone else. And it's like less on the multi-generational thing. When you put the two together, it was just a perfect select.
I think both we are very interested in how to, last something cross generation. And at that point, so we thought maybe, writing everything down is not always the best way to pass on. So this kind of the bench project is we haven't written down the concept everything yet. So because we need a kind of reinterpretation for the next generation, and that's sort of the argument in a good way is I think very important. I think.
Well, and that's certainly a major part in Māori culture of not writing everything down and passing on, and same in Japanese culture. And that's something, Kim, you've talked a lot about with us in the panel of how we do the stories. So I guess what's your hope and the aspirations with Tangata Whenua and the way we approach each site?
I think it's just thinking about how many. It's an amazing thing. It's a project that demands that you, like, let alone the challenge of the pie and 1,000 of them and all of those things. And actually just, you know, Sam is engaged in, just every time we talk to Sam, he is the kind of the community engagement, the iwi council, the local tennis club that is beside the bit of land, you know, like just layers and layers and layers of engagement, and watching these first ones come online and you just think, oh my gosh. But if you can commit to this process, which you would, and I guess for us, we were just, for being a part of the curatorial board, it was understanding that as a project, it understood its obligations within Te Ao Māori and with thinking about te tiriri, but thinking about land, you know, is this incredibly contested space that is so intrinsically part of the colonisation process of Aotearoa, that there's so much complexity around navigating spaces, but also it's a big thing, right, for us to decide that we should put something into the land and it should stay there, you know. That, and again, and I think we find this argument with public art a lot, is that we make this assumption that everyone wants it, you know. Oh, you know, and then and then there's some great towering ice cream cone in front of you or something that you know that casts a shadow, or you know, that I just think that we can intentionally and unintentionally have this very we can be very kind of assuming and kind of arrogant about what we think our environments want and need, you know. And so it was, our hope was that the project could be designed in a way that could somehow foster the complexity, and that is you know, tangata whenua, mana whenua relationships from the absolute beginning and then all the way through. And that is not a homogenised process. That is everywhere you are, there are different iwi, different partners, different groups. And it's amazing to watch what that process is beginning to look like in the real. But, you know, and again, you know, arts and culture projects and organisations across Aotearoa, we've all been on this process of transformation, some by choice, some forced into it, to actually understand how we fully work foundationally in a bicultural way. And so and Objectspace has very much been on this process of change in that respect over the last decade. And so it was, here it is, this huge long-term project, the importance of that being there from the beginning, just absolutely foundational.
No, thank you. And Madhav and I, we've got our community meeting with in Queenstown, as I mentioned at the start. And Tahuna Queenstown's a fascinating place because 1,000 years ago, there was no actual, it was a very transient place. So what's that like for you, Madhav, going in? You've had a couple of days in Auckland. Ngāti Whātua Kingi gave you a full tour yesterday, and first time here, and you designed something without a site.
It's been fascinating. I mean, I think also just the history of the place and the stories that have gone along with it and understanding it is such a important thing. It's actually one of the things that, one of the many things that drew us to this project was the kind of cultural connotations of it as well. And I think the idea of exchange between people and some creating some level of intervention that brings people together in a kind of, I guess, contested environment is a really important thing in a way. And I mean, it's been obviously fascinating and learning more about the history and the stories, and I think it's one thing that's been very nice is that the effort to bring people together and engage with all the communities from an early stage and have that as a kind of very strong narrative that runs through. So it's been very fascinating. And and in a way it's strange doing it when you're 12 hours behind. And doing it in the middle of the night. But like I think partly that's the reason I wanted to come here and be here is to kind of really just engage people, and I'm sort of very looking forward to that community engagement session.
So, and we're really clear as Paererewā that the works are not telling Māori stories, unless we would like to, and then that's a great thing. And but it's actually revealing the land, revealing the whenua, and highlighting different aspects. So before I open up for questions, Hideaki, what's your hope as when you were your father's age? What do you hope we've done with the project? But when you're 120,
Yeah, I still don't have very clear, the concept regarding the bench, because I think the bench has so many potentials. So I hope so. I like to discover a new way of, seeing of benches. So, for example, it's a little bit different story, but in Naoshima, we reinterpreted the house a few years ago. So, because there are so many the ruined, abandoned houses there, so the local community asked us, could you, rebuild that sort of houses? But we said, okay, so let's try to reinterpret what the house is. And usually, house is for people, of course, but at times we think it might be good. These kind of house is for artwork or something like that. So we transform them into the art galleries. So it's not galleries, so it's selling the artworks, but it's a kind of art house. So, but as a result, it lasts very well because people love that, people care about that. So it's getting, the better than, the before, because it hadn't used for, 20, 30 years and it's ruined down, but it's rebuilt. It's totally new house, but it's for artworks. So that community is very interesting. So there are 30, 40 houses there, but 6, 7 houses is for just artworks. So that sort of thing is very interesting for me. So I hope, so regarding your question, so in 50, 60 years, we might, think bench is not just sit on or reflect, but not sure, but there are so many opportunities. That's
great. I will definitely bring you some crazy concepts. I think that's our job now, to make sure we find some pretty out there things. I'll just open up for questions now from anyone about the project and about the work we're doing. If anyone has any.
Hi, I've got a question, or 2 questions actually. I'd like to know the timeline of the project. Like, is there, say, 5 benches reserved for in 1,000 years to be created? And my other question would be, what would your maybe the most unconventional designer on the list be? Because in the future, we got designers that design other planets or something. So what would your maybe dream be for the most wildest or unconventional designer to designer?
I think that's a really good idea of reserving some to be created a long time in the future. We actually haven't talked about that machination of the project, but it is successful making 10 a year. And Hideaki turns to me all the time and says, "How many benches have you made?" And still trying to hide.
Almost one.
Almost one. We have our first series of 6 about to be there. And I don't know about the unconventional. Can you think of any?
What has been interesting at the beginning, I think, is that because even the proposition of understanding materiality for 1,000 years is, mind-boggling. And so at the moment there's some quite heavy restraints around the type of material, and I really look forward to that kind of opening up, because I think to Hideaki's point, we can't predict the future and also the life of some materials, particularly natural materials. But we've got jewelers on the supply panel. I love this idea of someone that makes something that fits in the palm of your hand, has all of the tools to make something, that is this much larger human scale. But it's a crazy proposition to imagine who might be being commissioned in 50 years or 100 years, and it won't be us, putting that panel together. But I think that's the next couple of years, and the first 10 years are really going to set a tone for what's possible, and I think that's that thing of we cannot predict yet what this fully looks like, and so it's that idea that each one kind of adds to this vocabulary that hopefully keeps kind of slightly shifting and growing. But I guess, I was just going to say, the project really lends itself to these amazing collaborations between, makers or creative people and scientists, and or engineers, you kind of these like new materials, that kind of that intersection. I think is something pretty interesting and still feels so much in its infancy here.
Totally. Do you have anything to add to that around?
No, we don't have any clear timeline, but I think the important thing is not how to create the benches as soon as possible, but try to have or keep that sort of community who are talking about benches or the potential, because it's quite crazy. 30-40 people come to here to listen benches. So that's the interesting thing. So,
I felt we had an event last night. I felt bad there was nothing to sit on. It was,
That's right.
But the bench is kind of it's just bench, but we see more potential around there. People come together to talk about benches, and that sort of community might become another community. If it lasts few generation, it's going to become kind of cultures or something like that.
We've commissioned 10 designs so far, and one of the early ones that came back was from Karen Wilson. He was the arts laureate last year, and his one was amazing because it wasn't actually a bench. It was a te patu design. It's this large bronze sort of thing that is on this beautiful stand, and it's about communication of time. And it's a Maori time communication device that has been lost over time. And then there's this very simple seat that looks at that. And it's a stunning kind of thing to your question about designs that are very different, and we didn't expect it. In fact, I didn't even know what to do with it. It was like, I had to drive up there and have a conversation with him. And I said, well, where would we put it? And he said, no, I know where it's going. It's going here. It's going on that hill there. And then we just need to make it happen. So, okay, cool. It was amazing. Cool. Any other questions? Yeah. Michael.
My question was a follow-on. Being an engineer, it was around materials and knowing the Queenstown area and the schist. You've picked a material that's imported, probably from a coast, or it looks volcanic and it's rock. And has that been part of your processes? You're actually importing something into the environment as well, and just that concept of being that part of the journey and the storytelling. People often sit on something, looking at something without contemplating what they're actually resting on. So, interested in your thoughts.
Yes, I mean, it's going to come from the coast, the stone. So
Actually, Timaru Bluestone.
And actually, it's quite a journey. I think you've visited every quarry in the country, basically. And
as Michael knows, your quarry doesn't. You can't sort of ask them to just email you the photos of the stones. You have to turn up.
And so it's in a way it's been a bit of a journey as to determining what that stone is in a way. And it's kind of been, and that dictates how we're going to make it, and the process behind it, and the amendments we're going to make to it. But as I was saying, actually stone wasn't necessarily our first choice initially. We were kind of looking at other materials. We'd done a lot of work with metals previously. But actually, I think at that point I was saying, I didn't want to make something that felt of the now. I wanted to make something that felt timeless. Whereas I made the same metal again, it felt like this was made in 2025, right? And but we did a whole lot of research into timbers, all the native species here, how long they last for. We were looking at things that grew and actually growing something. But none of your trees live 1,000 years, I don't think. So that was like, that's not going to last. So how does that work? And we think about actually like rotting trees, and what does that impact of that happen? So I guess that question of like what other designers would be interesting. It'd be really fascinating to think about the material science of it, and what the possibilities are, and what becomes available, or what processes become available to do something in a different way. I think that'd be kind of a fascinating thing.
Thank you. Just a reflection. Being a baker's daughter, the most important ingredient in my father's bread, probably Derek's wife's bread, is thyme. and the whimsy of having something for 1,000 years. You know, whoever I mention this project to, they smile. They think it's like crazy idea. 1,000 years. It's lofty. And then seeing Sir David Attenborough's amazing documentary on Chernobyl, you know, completely destroyed, but nature comes back, and was very moving to me. So why I'm completely committed to this project is that the precious idea is giving Aotearoa, New Zealand, you know, down the road, 1,000 benches by 1,000 artists for 1,000 years. Is wow, they're going to come to New Zealand like they go to the Japanese art islands, you know, big time. We have something like the Taj Mahal that Derek had mentioned, like we don't have a structure that old, but if we have 1,000 structures that can engage the public and small communities and international communities, what a gift.
Thank you, Helen. Appreciate it. It's sort of 1 a mile if you did as the crow flies down the country. And we've worked a wee bit on this geographic spread of them around, and how you reserve a number for each marae and each council and then each number of other organisations, and that actually takes up about 500 of them. So there's only about 500 left. Which is any other questions?
Get in quick.
Get in quick.
I was just going to say, but to that point, yes, you haven't got a Taj Mahal here, but then that your beauty is your land, right? And your landscape. So it's quite a small intervention that is celebrating your Taj Mahal, right? You don't have to make something grand to kind of identify that.
No, it was a lot about what the bench looks at, and Hideaki's talked about that. It can be a very simple bench that just will, but if you put it in the right place, you're
framing a story of something. Yeah.
I'm interested in the process. And you begin with place, or do you begin with the design, and how does each influence each other? Is it a chicken and egg situation?
Do I answer that, or it's very much about place first. But for a start, we had to commission some designs to then be able to even have the conversation with place. So it's quite chicken and egg. But that's why we in all the ones that have been designed for somewhere archetypal space, we go down and then propose it to the community that there's something like this. Would you like it? And then invite feedback on the story and on the placement of it. And then what does it look at as the most important aspect. Yeah. But generally all place-based. But there are some really cool designs that are, this is for a place looking at a mountain, or this is designed to be underwater in 100 years, or this is designed to be da-da-da. So, okay, cool. And you've got to find, and land in New Zealand, I'm sure you can guess, is extremely difficult, and there's a lot of people to, you can only actually put something on somewhere for 34 years, otherwise it's a subdivision. So there's a lot of sort of complexities to work through, but that's what the endowment model does. And we might have to move some, and that's okay. And that's what our curatorial board, chaired by Heather Harris here, is going to help us do.
While you're developing the weirdest set of expertise, rock expert and subdivision expert.
Yeah.
Other questions? So it's a good question. So yes, the place is important, but the combination is very important. So not only the place, but the architect or artist or landscape or community or that sort of things. That sort of things what we have done in the island. So it's we should carefully talk about that. So what sort of combination would be leveraged the value the most. So I think it's not that the place is number one, but of course we need to identify some interesting places. But how we do for the art triennale is we identify several places and do some tour with artists and architects. So which place do you like or something like that?
Yeah, right.
Because there are some kind of
you feel it.
Yeah, feeling. Yeah.
Now, is there anything else we could learn from that you hope we'd learn from the Vanessa art site
Yeah, it's art project, but what we really interested in is how to, let people know about the beauty of Seto Inland Sea. So most people do not know about that. So it's, in a sense, we are just bringing artworks or architect to let people know about that how beautiful it is. So the Paererewā might be the similar thing. So New Zealand is quite nature-rich country, but how we can make this kind of nature better or more beautiful, rather than how to preserve because there are no pure natures anymore. I think almost all areas are affected by human beings. So we need to change our mindset to how to create a new type of natures which might last for a long time for the next generation. So in a sense, this bench project might be that's kind of the concept, how to create more interesting natures for New Zealand future or something like that.
Yeah, cool. Thank you very much, Hideaki. Well, I think that brings. I think that we're sort of out of time. So thank you very much for joining for our discussion on Paererewā, the 1,000-year bench project. Pae means threshold, and this, I think, event is a good threshold for today, a threshold in the project. Rere is how that flows into the world around it. So please flow into the world and talk about our project and come up with good ideas. And Wā is inseparable time and space. So we are really delighted that you came to the talk. Thank you very much to our esteemed panel, to Kim, to Madhav for flying all the way here a couple of days ago and spending so much time with us, and for you're helping create here, and to Hideaki for your brave support of this project, and to just particularly acknowledge Derek Handley here, philosopher, entrepreneur, tech guru, and all other good advisor. And thank you very much for your support, Hideaki. And that's the end of our panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.